Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 17 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. In this episode, we are going to be talking a little bit about some personal stories when it comes to spotting, how I learned, some things that I did when I was a kid that really set me on the path that led me to where I'm at today. So I want to go in a little bit more detail on how that applies to you, the shooter, and really just how super important this part is. I also want to give some updates on how things are going at the school. Of course, this coming week, we have our first shooting schools for 2019 kicking off. We have, of course, have a private shooting range here in Somerset, Pennsylvania, where we teach the classes, and it is a 13 or 14-year obsession with working on it. So we just finished up lots of work there at the range. We'll talk about some stuff we got going on there, and as well as some new classes that we're going to be offering for 2019. So really excited to share some of that with you as well. So without further ado, here we go. All right, so to start things out in this episode, I really want to go back and talk a little bit about some things that I did when I was a kid. And maybe this will all tie together and how and why I'm so passionate about spotting and really what it does mean to you, the shooter. So I'm in my late 40s now. When I was a kid at, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, it was nothing to see a bunch of kids running around with 22 long rifles heading up into the woods to go shoot, targets or bottles or cans or whatever that they had that they were going to take up and have some fun with. So I was very fortunate that I grew up in central Pennsylvania along a branch of the Little Juniata River, really secluded area, really in the middle of nowhere, and just lots of areas to roam as a kid to run around and do some crazy stuff. One of the things that I used to do a lot, and you can't do this now, so I'm not telling you to go out here and do these things. You probably get in trouble if you do these things that we did back then, but this is my life story, and this is really what happened, and it's sure we should talk about it. So when I was a kid, I used to go up. We had a branch of the Juniata River that ran alongside my home, and keep in mind, there's from my house up the river for several miles was just nobody. There's nobody around. And north of my house, just ever so slightly, was a set of railroad tracks, and it had, of course, railroad tracks ran across the river, which gave us a great elevated platform. So we had a trestle, is what they called it. And above the trestle, we had two branches of the Juniata where the river sort of split and then come back together. And so we used to set up there, probably 15, 20 feet into the air, and we'd watch up the river, and we would hunt turtles. If you've ever harvested turtles before, the only thing they stick out of the water is their nose, and somebody's there with a rake. So if you do shoot one, you got to get down there quick and get a hold of him with the rake and drag him up on the bank before he takes off. I mean, this is really straight up, almost full-blown hillbilly redneck stuff, but it really is how I grew up shooting. Squirrel season, it was nothing to throw your 22s in the car and take them to school so you could meet up with your buddies after school and go squirrel hunting. Of course, you can't do any of that today. But one of the things that taught me a lot is in the fall. Spring had a special thing. I'll talk about that in a minute. But in the fall, leaves would come down. Of course, the water levels were a little bit lower, and the water was moving slow. And the leaves would fall into the river, and you would watch up 50, 75, 100 yards. And we're talking open sight 22s, of course. And it was almost like Mother Nature's perfect shoot and see target. For a 12-year-old kid, 11-year-old kid up there setting, on a trestle on the railroad tracks over top the river. You're sitting there steadying your aim. You're watching the leaf come down, and you pick the one out that you're going to shoot, and you pull the trigger, and bam. If you've ever heard a 22 rimfire hit water, it's almost as loud as the gun itself going off. It makes quite a pop. But it really does. It's like nature's perfect shoot and see. And so I'll be absolutely honest that I've learned so much, not just about shooting, but follow through and watching your impact and reading that information. It was just awesome. It was awesome. So for a kid to get out and practice on your own, sit up there bored, I mean, you mowed grass all summer to buy bricks of 22, and when times were tough, you bought 22 shorts for, 50 cents a box, and you'd go up there and, spend an afternoon or an evening up there, with the rifle, on your knee and just practicing and having some fun. So learning to be able to spot your own shot and see your own impact and all of these things are absolutely detrimental to you, the shooter. I'm going to go back and tell you another story, and this is sort of my history. And like I said, don't do this stuff now. If you're listening to this podcast, please don't go out there and start doing this. A, I'm sure in a lot of places you can get in trouble for this. And B, probably going to be frowned upon if you're in the middle of a very busy neighborhood and you're out here doing these things, right? This is what we did back then. We're talking 35 years ago, right? In the spring, I always talk about shooting movers in the class. I get really excited about it. I love shooting moving targets. It's one of my favorite things to practice. It's one of my favorite things to do in matches. When we were kids, of course, there was a lot of fishermen and so on and so forth, and canoers and all of these other things that for miles upriver, guys would throw all their garbage on the bank and their bottles and cans. And in the spring, when the rains came, and sometimes heavy rains, it was the absolute best time for an unlimited supply of moving targets. And yes, I'm talking about the bottles and cans and all of these other things that when the high water comes and the river's flooding, it picks up all of this stuff off the edges of the bank, and here it comes down the river, and if it's really flooding, they're moving faster. And so one of my favorite things to do, and I'm going to share this out there just to be open and candid on all the things that I've done as a kid that were sort of fun but crazy, and I'm sure we've all done them. But those bottles and cans coming flying down that river, and whether we're up on the trestle shooting them or off to the side on the bank trying to time that shot, but you're following that moving target, we would use both trapping and tracking techniques, and we would literally just sit there and shoot the debris coming down the river. And so as far as shooting movers, probably where I got really hooked on enjoying shooting moving targets, because to be quite honest with you, it was like a big kid shooting gallery. If you can picture it, people throw it along the river and it's floating down there when it floods. I mean, we've seen everything from from TVs to washing machines and all the other stuff that people just discard along the road, and it winds up getting washed into the river, and when the big floods come, it picks it up and drags it right down the river with all the other garbage. So I guess two parts to this story is, number one, if you're fishing or you're going out enjoying yourself along the river, pick up your garbage. Be a nice thing to do, because you just gave us kids a bunch of free targets to shoot at when we were younger. So anyway, let's go back to why I'm telling you this story. Being able to be a good shooter, fundamentally, you've got your fundamentals involved. You've got the mechanical aspect, that's you dialing your dope and all the mathematics for the wind. You've got your environmental, which is your density, altitude, and your wind, and all these things that play into shooting. But if you want to be a really good shooter, you have to work on these things. You have to work on fundamentals. You have to get your dope ironed out. You have to have the mechanical aspects of the rifle so you can dial for your distance. And then you've got the environmental aspect of it. But if you really want to be a great shooter, you have to be able to learn to self-spot. You have to be able to see and read your own impacts for follow-up shots. The information that you get from these things is absolutely priceless. So I'm not the only one that believes this. If you go on and watch lots of TV shows that are out there on, sniper teams from around the world or sniper challenges, they'll all tell you quite often that the more experienced shooters, the actual spotter, that the less experienced shooter is the guy on the trigger. And there's an absolute reason for that. That more experienced shooter is watching impacts, corrections, wind, all of these other things. He's not just pulling the trigger. So he's not just focused on fundamentals. He has all the other things to worry about as well. So do you want to become a great shooter? Well, here's what you got to do. You've got to learn to spot and eventually self-spot. The hardest part about this is you can't learn it while you're shooting. You can see it and you can start to gauge it. And I can tell you this from experience. I've talked to several customers this spring already that have been through the school a couple of times, and they still struggle. And he was like, I get the concept, but I'll be honest with you. I mean, when I'm shooting, I can't see it. I don't know what's going on. And sometimes I see it and I really don't know what it means. So you have to be able to learn to spot, but you have to learn it behind a spotting scope, behind another shooter. It's like a math question. If all you're doing is shooting and trying to learn the art of spotting while you're doing it, it's like taking a second grader and giving them an entire book of algebra questions, no teaching, and saying, here, just take all these numbers, add them together, and just write your answer. Well, the kid can go through the whole book, and he'll never understand math. He'll never understand the pluses and minuses because he doesn't understand the questions, and he doesn't know if he got the right answer. If you want to learn math, you have to have a teacher to put a math question up on the board and break it down piece by piece, and then show you the answer, then show you how you came up with the answer. So you can go back and relook at the question and it makes sense. And now I hope this makes sense. I'm really hoping it comes across on the podcast well. But that's how spotting works. You just can't jump on the rifle while you're shooting and expect to learn the art of spotting. You have to do that behind another shooter putting rounds down range. And you have to focus on that. Those light bulbs have to come on spotting for somebody else. Once you learn the art, then you can apply it to you yourself while you're shooting, and that's where the priceless part comes into play. So if you want to move from good to great as far as a shooter, you have to learn to self-spot. Now this compounds because now that you've learned the art of spotting, and it makes sense, you're watching the bullet rise and fall, you're watching the impact in proportion to the target. You get to hear what the shooter's going to call in the wind. Hey, I'm going to hold a 1/2 mil left or 1/2 mil right. And then you get to watch the wind push it twice as far. And you're like, wow, that was pretty impressive. And then you're watching the wind while he's doing it. All of these things you're learning. I can promise you, I've learned as much about shooting watching other people shoot. Watching thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds go downrange behind a spotting scope. Even though I'm not actually pulling the trigger, I am learning every single time. That stuff's priceless. But here's where this sort of plays even more into your hands as a shooter. Because once you learn the art of spotting, then you have to learn the art of controlling the rifle through the recoil so you can self-spot. Just because you learn the art doesn't mean that it automatically happens once you get on the gun. It still can be tricky to see. Sometimes it's just a fleeting glimpse. Recoil management now comes into play. The rifle has to recoil straight back, it has to fall straight forward, and it has to do all this with you remaining stable in your firing position without you manipulating the rifle or making it move in places it doesn't want to go. All of this in an effort so when that rifle settles back down just in time for you to see the impact on target. That's where you grow as a shooter. So if you want to go good to great, you've got to learn to spot. And if you really want to be a good spotter, you can't do it while you're behind the gun. You have to be behind another shooter on a spotting scope watching rounds go down range. So this year we're excited in the class. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I've talked to lots of students over the years. And, you just can't lay on a rifle and shoot 4 or 5 hours straight anyway. And so we're excited that we're introducing this into the class. We just got 6 brand new Leopold Mark IV spotting scopes. So I want to say a big thank you to Shane at Leopold for making sure that they got here on time. The spotting scopes are on back order. They've been for a while. They're actually hard to get. And so Shane, if you're listening, thank you so much for getting this all put together and getting it here for our class. So we got these spotting scopes set up and we're really excited. This coming class kicks off Monday. This will be our first class where we're really going to throw this out there. And I'm actually expecting to see some big results, not just in the students being able to learn the art of spotting, but also watching them focus more on settling the rifle down and controlling the recoil to self-spot. Once you get that in your head that, hey, this is what you're looking for, now you're controlling the recoil. Same thing with a 12-year-old shooting into the little Juniata River. When you're pulling that trigger, if you want to watch where that bullet strikes, you've got to stay on target. You've got to control the recoil, and you have to be looking for it. You have to be looking for it. So we're excited to add that to the class this year. Now, something else that we're sort of excited about announcing that's going to be on the site here, it won't be on for about another 3 or 4 weeks. We're sort of getting all the details out. We've always wanted to offer some advanced classes, and we know that the shooting school, it's a 3-day class, and it really has to stay a 3-day class because it is a level 1 and 2. There are things that we don't want to break apart. They all go together as far as how everything's taught. And it's a building block. So when we teach one thing, we add the next, and we add the next. So our goal really at the 3-day school is to get you out and enjoying shooting to 1,000 yards and really getting your head really wrapped around all the things that you need to do as a shooter to enjoy it, right? It really is probably more like a 4-day class than 3 days. There's a lot of great information that we pass out, but to do it any other way would almost be bringing the shooters back in again and having to add a day to refresh the things that we have to build on to keep moving forward. So shooting school, 3 days, that's how it's been and it's how it always will be. However, though, the advanced classes are different. And what we tried to do in the past is we've tried to have like a 3-day class or a 2-day class that would incorporate getting your dope for the rifle and getting this, working on advanced wind calling techniques, working on positional shooting. And my thought was always about trying to get the most for the shooter coming in over the course of a day or 2 or 3, because I thought maybe that was, their opportunity for that year to come in. And I just wanted to try to get them as much training as I could in the amount of time that they had. But it was brought to my attention that maybe we should break these down into just 1-day classes where we talk about a specific subject. It'd be a lot easier for students to come in, attend the class. It'll be a lot less expensive, but then, we can do a little bit of open range time in the afternoon or evening after the classes are done, give them a little bit of free time at the range, but focus on maybe one advanced subject at a time. So it's just not overwhelming. And I thought it was a great idea. So the idea actually came from my wife. We were sitting down and talking and about some of the advanced subjects I would just love to teach, but it really is hard to, how do you want to structure this over 2 or 3 days? Do you want to add all these big subjects in and overwhelm the student? And she just said, break it down into 1-day classes, one subject for each day, and, separate them, a couple through the year. Just random 1-day class guys can come in and enjoy the day at the range. And I thought it was just a fantastic idea. So a couple of the classes that we're looking at right now that we're going to add, and we're probably going to put them under our long range shooting school. We have a drop down page or a menu. It'll be in there somewhere, probably like 1-day classes. So we are probably going to offer like an introductory class for those prepping for the school. That's going to be for those bringing their own rifles, just to run it through their paces. I think that's a great idea. We're going to hold a wind calling class. So we're going to try to do some advanced wind calling. A huge one for me is a dope class. And we're going to be talking about that in our next podcast. We have to help the students and really help them understand how to iron out their dope. So we're going to do an advanced dope class on being able to come in and get the dope worked out on your rifle. A positional class, which I think would be a lot of fun. We've done these in the past. I would like to bring in Brock Markwell. He's offered to do this sling class. He's a really great sling instructor. And so we can bring him in and, have him work with students for a day. He actually makes his own slings, all that great stuff. And I actually was fascinated. So Brock Markwell is the son of John Markwell, who runs the Allegheny Sniper Challenge. And that's where we hold the King of the Mountain event for our alumni. And I was watching off the corner. Brock had a young girl named Kira. I think Kira was about 13 or 14 at the time. Never shot slung before. And I could see him fitting her up with a sling and talking with her, and they were off to the side. And literally within 20 minutes, she's sitting there shooting targets slung, and I was absolutely fascinated on how well she was doing. Now, granted, she's a pretty good shot. I'll give her that. But that was pretty fascinating to watch. Brock just has this natural gift for teaching this position and really getting guys and girls sorted out quickly. So it was really fascinating to watch. So I'm excited to work with Brock and see if we can set up a sling class and bring everybody in for that would like to come in and join us for a day. So keep an eye out. It'll be a couple weeks until that's live on our website till we get the schedule worked out for the year. But that is one thing we're definitely excited to add. And on to the fun stuff. Now, we do have a shooting school that kicks off. We have clients coming in on Sunday for a sight-in. Class actually starts on Monday, and so we really were working our butts off at the range. It's a love-hate relationship there because getting a range and keeping it up to par and having all the steel out there. And like this year, we put new tents up with structural steel. There's a lot of work behind the scenes that goes on, especially in the spring before the classes kick off. I'd like to thank everybody that came out and helped, and we have more guys coming out to help this weekend, just a little finishing touches on this, that, and the other thing. So thank you all that come in and help prepare for the classes. So this podcast is going to be a little bit shorter, only because we have a lot of work still ahead of us. We will have a podcast that's kicking off next week. That podcast is going to be on dope, and I think it's really important for everyone listening that if you are interested in getting into long-range shooting, I'm hoping to go into more detail on how we do it, some new systems that are coming out, and I think it's getting better for us, the shooter. So looking forward to doing that podcast here and sharing that with you next week. Varmint Seasons is here, and so I want to throw out a challenge to everybody out there that's listening. If you get out and get a woodchuck, if you shoot, in your neck of the woods any critters, we haven't done it yet, but we would like to put a 500-yard club, a 1,000-yard club, and a 1,500-yard club page on our website. If you get a confirmed kill by a witness, right, on a varmint, at those distances, just write your distance down on, a piece of paper or cardboard, and you get in there with the picture and just have somebody take a picture of you. If you want to put the caliber that you're shooting, any of that stuff, great. You send us the picture here, and we'll start posting them up on the website, and we'll call it our 500, 1,000, and 1,500-yard club. So that's a challenge out there to y'all. We should have that up and running here in a couple weeks as well. So guys, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate you tuning in and listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot us an email. Our website is www.wolfprecision.net. Our email is contact@wolfprecision.net. And as always, you're more than welcome to give me a call here anytime. Of course, our number here is 814-262-7994. So, guys, thank you for listening so much. My name is Jamie Dotson from Wolf Precision Incorporated, and you are listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.